Protecting children is one of the most baseline instincts that any normal human has. Shows like To Catch a Predator capitalize on that fact, giving the viewer the satisfaction of knowing just one more kid had been kept safe as each episode went by. The show was eventually cancelled and has now been replaced by a ton of YouTubers looking to expose predators in one way or another. One of said YouTubers is Mamamax, who rose to fame through his campaign known as Pick a Side YouTube, where he called out YouTube for taking down multiple videos calling out predatory behavior. He got a lot of major YouTubers on his side, and he gained a lot of fans. Max had a bit of a dust up when 5 of his ex-girlfriends teamed up to cancel him by accusing him of a myriad of things, from just being a bad boyfriend to the worst types of assault. Max then released a now deleted video called Believe All Abusers, where he refuted the allegations and called out a man going by the name of Magnetar, who was the person who brought his exes together. This video raised his credibility even more and made him that much more able to go after predators. Max faded from the spotlight for well over a year until he released a video called Brainwash Your Favorite Influencers, which flung him right back into controversy. In the video, Max claims that a vampire cult was created in order to draw in young girls. He shows a man showing off a set of fake fangs and claims that he is the one who has been victimizing these young girls. Max also gives out his full name, which I'm not going to repeat, so let's call this guy Dracula. A really important detail to keep in mind here is the fact that Max gives no type of evidence for any of his claims against Dracula. Despite that lack of evidence, he makes a point to call out PewDiePie, Joe Rogan, MrBeast, and a few other major content creators. This worked the last time he tried it with Pick a Side YouTube, but there are two major differences. The first being that what was being talked about in that instance was a widespread issue, so he had a lot of community overlap that helped force the issue. And the second was the fact that he had gotten a lot of well-known YouTubers involved with the making of the video, lending a lot to his credibility, making the YouTubers he called out a lot more willing to join in. In this case, neither of those things were true, so the movement was dead on arrival. A lot of people were critical of Max for how he was handling the situation, so he released a video called This Is What Happened to Mamamax, where he responded to some of the comments who were critical of him. This video did a lot of good for his image, and the people in the comments were very supportive of how he was handling things. This of course was all thrown away as soon as he made his next video reacting to the reactions of SS Sniper Wolf's actions. This video was clickbait meant to call out the fact that people focus on these meaningless stories instead of the abuse of children. It is true that these stories get a lot more attention, and that's because people like drama. Max comes off as a bit out of touch with how the average person feels. The things Max talks about are pretty hard to stomach, and sometimes people just want to hear a dumb story that has no bearing on real life. Penguin Zero, or Charlie, who is one of the most popular commentary YouTubers on the platform, is also a major component of the video, with Max deciding to focus in on asking for his attention specifically. Max had apparently reached out to him through Discord without getting an answer, so he decided to make a public call out. As it turns out, Charlie was sick during the time that Max tried to reach him, which is why he didn't respond. In all honesty, even if he wasn't sick, this video was not necessary in the slightest. Remember, this is all being caused by allegations of a cult that was abusing minors, which, as I'm sure you're all aware, is illegal. If you have evidence of that kind of thing, the cops should be called. The best way to go about this would have been to submit the evidence to the police and let it be. And if you feel like you really need to make content off of this whole thing, just wait until the court case is over and then use what you have to make a documentary. The only problem is he has no evidence, or at least not evidence the police would take, so he has resorted to publicly shaming Dracula and trying to guilt trip Charlie. This video was the final nail in the coffin of Max's reputation, and the rest of the drama was just him being lowered into the ground. Max ended up hosting a live stream to discuss the issue further with people who were disagreeing, which only managed to make things worse. One of the people who called in was Lyrix, another commentary YouTuber who called out Max for putting out the name of a man with no proof of his wrongdoing, while also pointing out the fact that Max had been accused without proof himself in the past. Most of the conversation between the two is just them going in circles over this fact for an hour, and it's pretty clear that Max knows he's doing the same thing he would personally disagree with, but because the shoe is on the other foot, he's willing to ignore it. Max ended up kicking Lyrix from the call just for some of the victims who Max had with him to take Lyrix's side, leading to Max starting an argument with them. Muda from Some Ordinary Gamers then called in, and he explained that the original video Max had made was pretty confusing, and because Max simply can't stand any level of criticism, he instantly flips responsibility onto Muda, despite Muda approaching it in the best way possible.
You know, they have a million cases to deal with. If you bring them black vampire cultist, they're gonna sit down and think, okay, where the fuck do we begin? You know? And that's ultimately the situation. Look, I want to see this asshole fucking, if what you're saying is 100% true, I want to see this motherfucker behind bars. But there's a way to present this, there's a way to handle this before you get to that point, right? And that's what we need to be focusing on. That's like where everything needs to be centered on. It is where I'm at, and that's all I really can say about the situation.
Okay, so I would have really appreciated this like 2 months ago when we first reached out. I reached out to you and multiple other creators asking for help, and none of you were responsive. I understand y'all are busy and doing your own things.
If you felt so strongly that you couldn't do the story justice on your own, why make a video at all? Forced content is the worst type of content, and this is a very sensitive subject matter, so erring on the side of caution was clearly the better choice here. Of course, the reason he didn't hold off was the fact that he's living with Spencer, who is the main victim leading the movement against Dracula. As it turns out, Spencer has been a family friend for most of Max's life, which made him the exact worst person to cover the situation. If one of the people most dear to you came up to you claiming that they had been victimized, you would probably want to help in any way you could. The ones who are close to us are the ones we trust the most, so of course Max was willing to dive into the deep end of the story with no life vest. He let his heart guide him, and that decision might end his career entirely. Muda has now publicly come out against Max, and it feels like there really isn't anyone left in his corner. And that's really unfortunate, because the conversation has now shifted away from the possible victims completely due to how Max has handled it. Even if Dracula is guilty, people will be focused on something entirely different by the time that comes out. For someone who is apparently so tapped into what people are paying attention to, Max sure didn't use the spotlight time he had very well. If you remember at the beginning of the video, I brought up how To Catch a Predator gave the viewer satisfaction of knowing just one more kid had been kept safe. Most of the people who they caught weren't convicted in a court of law, but their lives were still ruined by the social consequences of losing jobs, spouses, and their reputation. Because he more than likely doesn't have any proof worth anyone's while, Max seems to be trying to invoke that same social pressure, and has spent the last month tripping over himself, even sinking to the point of threatening Larix with copy strikes for what he claims is doxing, even though he said that very same thing was not doxing.
I think it's fair to say if you're uncovering personal information about someone that they don't offer themselves, that's a form of doxing. I mean, you could play semantics about it, but if you fucking like release my full name on live stream right now, that would be a form of doxing. Absolutely.
Full names do not count as PII and do not count as doxing.
I think we've reached a point where Max is completely grasping at straws, because we all know that misuse of the copy strike system is the kiss of death for a YouTuber's reputation. Yet Max is willing to threaten that very thing in writing, knowing good and well the messages will be sent around. Those messages were the last resort for Max, and just like almost everything he has done lately, it fell flat on its face. Max decided at this point that the best recourse was for him to put out a non-apology where he refused to take any responsibility for how badly he had botched the case.
And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I can't make all of you happy. I'm sorry to Charlie for dragging him into a case that is not necessarily his fight. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to my audience who don't even know what the heck is going on. Like I'm uploading shorts, I'm doing live streams, I'm doing weird ass videos. Just trying to find the remaining survivors of. That has always been the goal for this awareness campaign.
When you apologize to someone, you've really only taken the first step. What actually makes an apology good is changing your behavior, which Max has shown no indication of wanting to do so. In the past week or so, tons of videos that were critical of Max have been making the rounds, and one of the most popular of these videos was made by Muda, who was obviously outraged at the prospect of being lied to over something so serious. Max then decided that the best way to combat this would be $1 million lawsuit. Max has apparently reached the point where he's so focused on the public perception of how he's handling the case that he doesn't even want to pretend that this is about the victim. Taking the time to start up a frivolous lawsuit that you have a pretty good chance of losing while also building a case against Dracula isn't a good idea in the slightest. The work that Max has done over the past few years has gotten him a lot of praise, and that can go to a person's head pretty easily. When someone's ego has been inflated to a certain point, it gets harder for them to accept that they might have gotten something wrong. Here's another example of Max's ego taking over.
Literally cancel you, Charlie. I could literally cancel you, and I choose not to. It's true though. It's the truth. I'm the friggin' pedo hunter. Will not. I clicked this video because I thought he was talking about me. Are you okay? Are you sure?
Why do I do this to me?
Because I get it. I get what I'm doing is creepy and obsessive. It is. But I promised them I would not let them down, and I will not.
Max comes off as someone who thinks that they're invincible and can do no wrong. Hopefully the recent fallout has shown Max that no matter how big you get, no matter how many cool videos you put out, believing your own hype can have some pretty bad consequences. It doesn't have to be over for Max, and I think that's the worst part of this whole thing. If he were to come and say that he messed up and that he's going to commit to fixing it and being better in the future, I think he would have a real shot at getting back a lot of goodwill from the community. As it stands, Max is going to pick this particular hill to die on, and his ability to help children will die as well.